Zonta International once again very proudly presents the Remarkable Women Powerful Stories webinar series. And I welcome you to my conversation today with Emma Beal, who is passionate about using the tools of economic policy and analytics to make a positive impact in the global energy transition, and a Zonta International winner of the Jane M Klausman Women in Business Scholarship in 2018. I'm Lynn Foley, and I'm truly privileged to speak with remarkable women who are so generous with their stories and with their time. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also pay that respect to any First Nations people present. Zonta International is a leading global organisation working together to build a better world for women and girls. So Emma, I warmly welcome you to our conversation today.
Thanks for having me, Lynn. Excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. And as we begin, I'll give the audience just a short introduction to you and your achievements. So Emma holds a Bachelor of Advanced Finance and Economics with first-class honours from the University of Queensland, which is where we're both speaking from today, where she graduated valedictorian with the University Medal. And she's passionate about using those tools of economic policy, which I've just spoken about. And of course, we'll talk more about your Zonta International Women in Business Scholarship as we progress the conversation. And Emma's gone on to work in really interesting places with her current work. And I think we'll leave my talking about that now and let that emerge as we have our conversation. But Emma also has a lot of other interests that she has pursued as a young girl growing up, and also now as alongside of her work. So Emma, I think we should just get on with the conversation. What do you think?
Yeah, no, sounds good. Let's go.
Okay. Well, when we talked recently, Emma, I realised that your life so far had been filled with lots of adventure, starting in your family at such a very young age. So I'd like to start our conversation there and with where and how your story began, and ask you to describe your personal and career highlights so far.
So I'd say my childhood and early years definitely had a role to play in shaping my interests and passions, which have then gone on to sort of inform my professional pursuits as well. So I was the eldest of four in a very busy household, but in particular, my siblings and I, we were all very competitive, all involved in high-level sport in some way. And I think there was always this sense of, if, you know, my brother or my sister can do it, then I can do it too, and I want to do it too. And I think that sort of refined itself into a form of determination that I see in my whole family across the board today. But yeah, I grew up in this household where things like camping and hiking, they were just such an integral part of our life and growing up, and that allowed me to develop this great love for the outdoors from a very young age that I've carried through me my adult years as well. As well as that, growing up in Queensland, as you mentioned, Lynn, where there was lots of beaches and mountains and valleys to explore, I developed such an appreciation for the outdoors, but also for the fragility of lives and livelihoods exposed to our changing climate. Because as you would know, we get some pretty crazy weather up here. So I experienced the full trifecta from floods, droughts to fires. So just to go into some of those experiences for a moment, I was quite young when the 2011 floods hit southeast Queensland. I was actually on a summer camp at the time. Little did I know that I'd been dropped off on this camp, and it was near a dam, and I was just very upset that canoeing got cancelled because of all the rain that was going on. But we were actually completely islanded on this camp, unbeknownst to us, running out of food. And thankfully, the flood waters receded enough by the end of sort of the 10-day camp for our parents to get back in on pickup day. And I remember just coming back to the towns and the cities where we were all from, and it was entirely different. It's like I came back to this whole new world where, as you'll remember, our towns just got swept down rivers and floated away. And so I came back into just this whole new environment, and volunteered as part of, we called them the Mud Army, because of, you know, the huge devastation caused by the mud that came through all the homes. And I was too young to go into the homes at that point because of the health risk, with the mud being from the floor to the ceiling on like 2-story homes. But what I did with my younger sister is we would sit out on the curbs of the streets, and people would bring us photos that they'd salvaged from the floods, and we would sit there and just clean off the photos to try and, you know, have some sort of replica of people's lives before this crazy devastation that wiped everything away. From there, I sort of went into high school, and my school did at least annual trips out into the drought and flood affected communities in Western Queensland. So lots of the little towns that you would know of, like Tara, Chinchilla, St. George, Dalby, all these little farming agricultural towns. So went out and helped a lot there and saw the effects of the floods and the droughts out there. I also saw the effects of droughts at my family's cattle farms, which were up in northern Queensland, where it's extremely hot at times. And yeah, we had to go out and hand feed the cattle at points because there was just not enough food for the livestock, and they were sort of starving and dying. And it was a really hard time for my family at that point, when we were getting no rain for a few years. And then finally, just a couple of years ago, Australia really struggled with the bushfires, and there was a point where the reserve at the back of my family home caught on fire, and the flames were all the way up to the treetops. So we had the whole street down there trying to fight the fire, the choppers coming across, dumping water bombs on our homes. So yeah, I've kind of seen it all in my time growing up here. It's been crazy, and collectively, I think that set of experiences was really pivotal in helping me to identify a career in climate action, but more specifically, professionally contributing to a solution to the energy trilemma, which is reliable, affordable, and sustainable electricity. And that's the mark I'm hoping to leave across my career. And what that's looked like so far is a range of professional experiences across a variety of industries. They include everything from private equity and funds management all the way through to consulting and research and academia as well. So particular highlights on my end have been my current role working with Boston Consulting Group in their climate and sustainability practice, as well as the research I was able to do as part of Oxford University's Economic Recovery Project, where I helped to analyse the flows of green fiscal finance that was deployed during COVID, and what the impacts of that huge fiscal outlay looked across the world.
Thanks, Emma. It's a lovely, I guess, introduction to what took you into the climate change after your initial university studies. In 2024, Brisbane is the chosen city for the Zonta International Convention. And so we've just given them an overview of our amazing country, haven't we? And particularly the amazing state of Queensland. I think we've done flood and fire and drought and all flooding rain. So maybe as I go on in your conversation, I'll also say we have amazing beaches, and southeast Queensland and Brisbane is an amazing city.
Beautiful part of however,
2011 was a particularly difficult time when we had a lot of rain and our lovely river flooded, which is what you were talking about. And it was a very, very difficult time for people in our beautiful city of Brisbane. Okay, so I know then that your university study was in the area of finance and economics. So as a young girl growing up in school, what caused you to go down that path? I understand that you're applying that now to climate action and all the things around that. So, but what took you into that when you were at school, from school?
Well, initially I was just attracted to it because I just loved maths and numbers. I was just a big nerd back then, probably still am, was quite good at anything quantitative. And I just really wanted my university degree to involve that in some way. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I remember just flicking through the university catalogues and I saw this advanced finance economics degree where the description was something along the lines of the students who want to be quantitatively challenged. And I was like, that's me. So without knowing much else, I just signed myself up, got into the course, and I rocked up to my first ever lecture. It was introduction to macroeconomics or something like that. And I remember learning about supply and demand, like very simple, but learning about that for the first time and going, what is going on? And I went home and I Googled what is economics. And that was really my first understanding of economics was when I signed up for university. But I ended up really falling in love with the economic side in particular. I just love the framework that it provides you to think about problems in all areas of life in such a structured way. And I think I apply that mindset and that way of thinking daily in my course of work. So such a helpful skill, and so thankful to have studied that degree and landed there by accident in a way.
I love that story because I too did economics as my major when I went to university a very long time ago, Emma, and I think you and I have discussed this in the past. And at least I'd studied economics in the senior school, so I had a sense of what it was. But anything between what I'd done in senior school and what macro and microeconomics looked like, yes, I had that moment of what have I done? Why am I doing this? But again, like you fell in love with it, and you know, you're right. It does provide a lovely framework for all of the work that we all do, whether it's in education or in the world that you work in. So I know you just cursored across some of the projects you've so far been involved in. Is there any one of those projects that you've been deeply involved in that global energy transition space and the broad climate sustainability that you could share some aspects of, and how you believe it really contributes into that social and economic aspects of our lives? So you got a sense of maybe one of those or two, whatever you choose.
Yeah, no, so I've been very fortunate to work across quite a variety of cases related to climate and sustainability in my role at BCG, Boston Consulting Group. And these have included everything from being in the private sector, doing rapid market sizing analysis to allow, you know, a major vertically integrated gentailer to choose its next generation of low emission products, to, you know, completing an independent review of New Zealand's energy system and providing recommendations as to their optimal decarbonisation pathway for energy. And that's everything from electricity, transport, industry. But probably one of my highlights have been most recently helping to develop the strategy for the closure of a tier 1 thermal coal mine, including what that transition might look like for the local community that has been built up around this major mine. It's one of the first of probably many transitions like this that we will see around the world as our energy mix transitions. So the social side of this global energy transition is something that I'm deeply passionate about and resonates with me, coming from an extended family with lots of coal miners and a multi-generational kind of aspect of coal in my life. So I really appreciate and understand that, you know, cheap energy for Australia has been our economic backbone for quite some time. It has quite a role to play in at least our historical and long-term prosperity. And those kinds of industries have really put food on the table for so many families for so many years. And it's those families and our regions over here who stand to potentially lose out the most from the global energy transition if we don't manage the distributional outcomes really effectively and carefully. And so for me, the concept of having human-centric policy and strategy design is something I place a lot of value on in my work, and considering the recommendations that I would put forward, where I kind of want to balance all those more economic and financial and environmental aspects as well. But I think, yeah, it's really important to consider the social side as well, Lynn.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we've talked, and it's what the world is talking about at the moment, which is the 2050 net zero goal, and the whole climate change and sustainability right in the forefront of everything across the world. You know, the political, the social media discussions, all across television, everywhere. You know, in the buses, at the bus stops, wherever it is, it's there, and it's really come to a time in life that we're incredibly concerned about that and focused on trying to get there. So you have mentioned to me, it feels like it's perfect timing for you at this stage of career, excuse me, with the net zero goal ahead of us. Have you got some ideas or thoughts to share?
Yeah, so yeah, my career pretty much perfectly lines up with that transition to net zero by 2050, if you think it's going to be 30 years or so. So yeah, we need to really begin front loading that effort and doing the heavy emissions cutting today, because we're going to have to focus on that last couple of percent, which are really tricky to deal with in our last decade on that runway. So in my mind, the reason I've chosen to focus on the energy component specifically is that energy sector is the major unlock for decarbonisation. And given the timing of my career, it just makes most sense to focus my efforts there. And I find it, a challenging problem, but a really exciting one, because not only is electricity the low-hanging fruit of decarbonisation, but reliable, affordable, and low-emission energy is going to be the unlock for decarbonisation in other areas of our economy, in particular things like transport and industry through electrification. So that's why it's so important in my mind to get the investment and the market settings for the energy sector structurally correct today, so that we can usher in that next wave of technology that we need to support a sustainable, low emissions and thriving economy out into the future. Yeah.
It is, and it feels like it's a long haul, because we're talking about decades rather than years. But all of a sudden we're in 2023 and it doesn't seem to be that far away, does it?
No, it'll go very fast.
Very quickly,
yes.
trying to make a difference there. So in the pursuit of making that difference in climate change and sustainability, it seems to me that the current state of gender equity globally is a really important consideration. Do you have a view of the apparent intersection between those two areas of, managing our climate change and the place of gender, particularly women and women's leadership in that?
So, climate change, energy transition, they're such multifaceted, complex global problems. And, we've already discussed some of sort of the social and distributional considerations. But of course, there's important economic, financial aspects, emissions, environmental impacts as well to be considered. And given there are so many elements to this problem, it's critical that we kind of bring a diversity of perspectives to the challenge to come up with, a more comprehensive, holistic package of solutions that recognize all the prongs to the issue at one time. And that's why I think female participation is so important in this space, so that we can incorporate women's unique perspective and view into solving this issue. And while we are seeing more and more women in energy and in resources every day, I can say, working from a place in business and finance, that I've often found myself to be the only woman in the company or the startup or the team. So there's clearly, more progress to go here. And I do think that, women are attracted to the idea of making a positive impact in the world through something like the energy transition or climate action. But I remember that narrative kind of only just beginning to break through in my high school experience, which really wasn't too long ago. Yeah.
That's right. It is fairly recently that you were coming through high school. So I think now might be the time to ask, I don't know which way to go. I think I'll go to STEM first. So you work in that broad STEM discipline through I guess, the finance and the math particularly. And I'm interested in your thoughts on why girls often feel so underconfident or apparently underconfident in studying STEM subjects, both at school and then following into university and career. What do you think needs to be done earlier in school life to ensure that girls build that knowledge and confidence to choose that pathway? And perhaps it's linked to where you just were about, at the moment, often being the only woman or the only girl in the space, or it being in the minority, which then could be seen as a barrier. So perhaps I'd link those two together. You know, we've got that issue in STEM still in our country, and I'm assuming in some other countries as well. I'm really interested in, having recently experienced that and still experiencing it, what you think.
So coming out of high school, which was less than a decade ago, I would say there are definitely a lot of programs and scholarships to help channel girls into STEM, which is a really positive thing. I remember the careers advisors kind of constantly reminding me about all these cool opportunities and places that I could, you know, go into engineering, for example. But I think the big problem for me as a girl in high school was that I didn't think I had an interest in something like engineering, because to me, at the end of grade 12, engineering was for people who loved Lego and were good at building things, which just wasn't me, and still isn't me, if I'm honest. And while that subset of people, who can include women as well, would potentially enjoy a STEM field, something that I wasn't able to recognize back then was that there was so many other career options that I potentially could have taken that would have been interesting to me back in high school if they had been expressed to me in a different way and linked to that field of study in a different way. And yeah, I think there is that idea of, we don't have many examples ahead of us of women doing these things yet, to provide that example. So as you were talking about that barrier, so that I could recognize and see myself doing something like that, I think. So, you know, if I had a woman come into my school and do, you know, flash a big interactive data visualization of, you know, Australia and the climate, and if I could, you know, slide some variables, see how the algorithms change with different policy settings, that visualization might have changed that impression for me, because I would have been excited by that. And, you know, I might have been interested in the energy field much earlier on rather than sort of weaving around and finding it eventually. But yeah, back in high school, for me, energy was all about wiring up circuits and making sure the light bulb switches on when you flick the switch. So that wasn't something that particularly appealed to me, but it was the way it was taught back in school. And while that methodology of teaching does generate interest in both men and women into those STEM fields, I think there are potentially a more diverse set of career outcomes that we could express to girls in high school that would appeal to them at a far younger age.
And in your case, seeing how, if you go back to the math nerd, and so many of us, I was a math nerd as well, and there are many women who were math nerd at school, but it was, yes, limited, and you couldn't see how, as a 16-year-old, that knowledge of the mathematical knowledge and the talent that you have for that, how that could apply. How would that be applied out into different ways and places and industries? And that's a really interesting perspective. And sometimes perhaps we're not thinking of that in the education space, which is where I come from, of course, and thinking about how we can win the hearts and minds of young women to look at things outside of the paradigm or the social models. I think we've done really well. There are so many iconic role models out there doing amazing things in astrophysics and all places, but not enough. It's not dense enough yet, is it?
Yeah, we need that kind of collective mass to get the momentum. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that all girls can see what they want to be. And as
Mm.
you said, if you can't see it, you don't know that you want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Who've been the most powerful influences in your life and role models? And what have you learned from the people or the network? Because I'm fascinated. I actually know the answer to this, don't I? So I'm interested in sharing this, the way this works for you with the other people that watch. So the powerful role models or influences.
Yeah, so you're right. I have a bit of a different answer to this question, because when people often ask this, they have, that one particular professional mentor or motherhood figure in their life that they, go to. And not to say that those people in my life have not played important roles in and influences in who I am today. But more my point is that I think it has truly taken a network of people and role models in my life to shape me into the person that I am today. So, for example, I've grown up with an amazing, extensive family friend group where we have multiple generation of women in that group. And some have taken on mother roles for me, mentor roles for me. I call them my aunties. And then there are other girls who are younger than me or closer to my age, and they feel like friends or younger sisters. And within that group, I can go to different individuals. I can also go elsewhere in my life for advice on different problems, and I can get as well multiple perspectives to the same issue, but from different viewpoints. So I think in that sense, I have this beautiful kind of peer-to-peer network of mentorship and leaders to draw upon amongst the women in my life, as opposed to, that single role model figure that I would call upon in, all situations. So yeah, I would say that network has been one of those key influences for me.
So it takes a female collective or a female village to raise a global energy transition professional.
Exactly. And all of us have, we've all gone and done different things and are all passionate about different things. It is a little cheesy, but our group chat is called Village Girls. So, it really is though, that sense of a village and a network. And I'm so thankful to have that. Yeah.
And the next thing you would tell me, except it's not from your generation, is your theme song is a song from the village people.
Yeah,
but
no, we don't. It's not from my generation. I can tell you a single song from them. I'm so sorry.
Neither can I, and I think it is from my generation, and I can't either. But it was a nice pun. And, allow me to have the pun.
Yeah, I'll let you have that one.
I've realised over time that mentoring is not only a one-way relationship, and it's apparent to me that those of us who are much further down our careers can learn as much from a mentoring relationship with someone at your stage of career. I'm wondering how that's happened for you as well, in maybe your relationships in the workplace, or again in the group of women in particular that surround you.
Yeah, I think if I think about some of the best leaders and mentors that I've had in my life, they help me define leadership. And I think personally, one of the greatest strengths you can have as a leader is your ability to leverage diversity of perspectives of people all around you, be them mentors or mentees, to develop, a better understanding on a problem or collaborate on a better solution. So yeah, those great mentors or leaders are the ones who, come in from potentially a greater position of wisdom, but take a genuine interest in, my views and concerns in the world, and listen to my ideas, and really genuinely trust in my abilities when they, entrust me with a task. And it's those situations where I feel most empowered to take ownership over things and lead the thinking and action myself, and use my mentor as more of a sounding board, as opposed to just waiting for them to tell me what to do. you know, and I think in that way I'm able to think about things myself and share them upwards with a mentor, and share my view and perspective. And I think creating that, or allowing, with my mentor allowing me that space to lead the thinking on different things, creates that kind of reverse mentorship that you were kind of talking about, Lynn. One where there's this expectation that I, as the mentee, can feel really empowered to say what I think and what I think should be done. And I think that whole process is really important in allowing the next generation of leaders to develop and come through. Yeah.
Fabulous. I think it's incredibly important for women of my generation of career to see that, because to stay in touch and to stay current and to have a different perspective. We live in the same universe, but at times it's like a parallel universe. So we have to actually make sure that we're in touch. I think that's from my view anyway. You won the Zonta International Women in Business Scholarship back in 2018, and that's where we first met. How did that scholarship assist you coming from then till now? And what did it open for you? I think I'd like to ask this question because it helps others to understand the power of such a thing.
Yeah, so many ways. There was sort of the direct impact of the scholarship, which was that it allowed me to fund an exchange overseas during my university years. And over there, I studied a subject on developing nations and emerging economies. So that subject, further affirmed my passion to assist vulnerable nations through my professional pursuits, which was part of my letter for applying for the scholarship in the first place. And since then, I've gotten to directly do that, for example, through my work at Oxford, but also indirectly, given that vulnerable nations are some of the most exposed to the effects of our climate and our changing climate, as well as the distributional consequences of a potentially uncoordinated energy transition. So yeah, I didn't quite know what I think I wrote. I wanted to help vulnerable nations in my letter, and I didn't know what that looked like practically at the time, but I've been able to find my feet and refine that through the journey that the scholarship unlocked for me. I also met an amazing network of friends on my exchange, and two of whom I now live with in Melbourne. So it's just crazy how the world works, and that connected me to those great friends now. So very thankful for Zonta for that. But beyond that, I've been fortunate enough to be involved with various Zonta sort of advocacy events over the years since 2018. But most recently, Zonta was amazing in supporting me in my fundraising effort to raise $20,000 for Australian women who were survivors of domestic violence. So I did that by cycling around Australia's island state of Tasmania. So I did 1,300 kilometres in 2 weeks. And yeah, Zonta was really pivotal in helping create awareness for the ride, and also for its members financially contributing to that fundraising effort as well. So yeah, Zonta's been a massive part of my life over the last couple of years.
And that club was that particularly supported you was one of the clubs on the Sunshine Coast, the beautiful Sunshine Coast of our state, the Caloundra City Club, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
So out of that event came an unfortunate accident that you had, and I suppose we could call that a barrier or particularly a challenge that you had to work through and overcome. I wonder if you're willing to share just a little bit of what happened and how you've, I guess, I don't like to use the word recovery, how you've managed your way through that. So in the middle of this amazing event in Tasmania, something happened.
Yeah, so it was actually just a couple of days in, so weren't too far along the ride yet. And as you'll know, Lynn, the roads in Tasmania are very narrow at points, very windy, and we'd often, the little pack would pop off the side of these very narrow roads into sort of this gravel on the side of the asphalt. And when you did, it was sort of like ice. You didn't have control over your bike really. And we'd kind of do that every now and then. It'd be okay. You'd pop back up onto the main road. And yeah, there was just one point I was coming down like a slight hill. It wasn't too crazy, but I was moving pretty quickly and popped off the side of the road. And unfortunately, the road there was quite a ledge to come back on, and didn't have any control over my bike, and the front wheel just wedged into that ledge. And if you can imagine, the back flipped 180 degrees, landed on my head facing the other direction. And yeah, I can't remember the accident, but I was pretty banged up. Didn't know where I was or what day of the week it was at the time. And there was like a concern that I had potentially broken my neck through the accident. So, full ambulance, went and got all the scans, wasn't allowed to move, kind of thing. And thankfully, everything was okay. I was very fortunate because cycling accidents can often go a lot worse. And I kind of got away with some nasty gravel rash scars all the way up the side of my body that I have as a little memento of that accident. And I just had, some pretty bad concussion headaches and whiplash, and was generally just a bit beat up and sore after that. But I took a couple of days off, but did get back onto the bike to finish the ride. And I think that sort of highlights for me that experience, the importance of really being purpose driven in any of the sort of leadership ambitions that we take on, because having that purpose is so important in maintaining the resilience that we need when we do front up with these kind of big challenges that we come across. And if I was just doing that cycle for myself or for the thrill of the challenge, I don't think I would have had the strength or the need or really the courage. I have a good fear of gravel now, to get back up on the bike. But because I was doing it to help those women who were going through, arguably much worse situations than I was in that moment, but on the daily as well, as part of their everyday lives, I was able to get back on the bike and finish it off. So yeah, that's sort of how I went about overcoming that challenge.
That's called tenacity, and I'm sure there was a lot of pain involved, and there was a lot of a lot going on for you while you continued to finish that ride, not the least of which was possibly a slightly broken bike that had to be also repaired. Bikes repair a little bit more quickly though than our bodies, don't they?
Yes, we did need to source a new helmet because the helmet was cracked. So yes, had to go find a helmet in the rural towns of Tasmania.
And all I'd say there is that's why we wear helmets, isn't it? So that we can hopefully have less injury if we happen to come off the bike. Exactly. So I wanted to ask a little bit about, you mentioned earlier about being sometimes the only woman or one of a small group of women in your workplaces, whether it's in the workplace or when you're doing projects or wherever. What sort of barriers have you come across, or potential challenges that seem to get in the way or be related to either gender or age or any of the things that challenge us? I wonder, have you got one or at least one of those, and can you talk to us about how that affects young women in particular and what you can do about it?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this one a little bit before jumping on to record, Lynn, because it's one that I haven't heard personally many young girls talk about, but something that I've had to learn to navigate, and is in some ways related to my gender, definitely, but also more generally just my appearance. And to someone meeting me for the first time who doesn't know about my experiences or who I am, I do appear a lot younger than I am in the experiences that I hope precede me. However, often that makes it really hard for me when I walk into a room to, from the get-go, build the credibility that perhaps others don't have to work so hard or have to worry about when they do step into a room in front of a new group of people for the first time. So to just give some really tangible examples of how that's impeded me in the past, I've been told that I'll definitely struggle to have presence with a client because I am small framed and blonde. I've been asked to send through older looking headshots for panels that I've talked on so that I'll appear to be a more expert on the topic. And I've also been rejected from a graduate banking role because, and I quote, despite having the best technical responses and understanding of the candidates who were all the same age, this was a graduate role, and so all the same experience levels as me, I was not suitable for the role because I appeared too young and bubbly. So there's just some, various examples of many where my appearance has kind of made it really hard for me to get into the room in the first place. But I have, worked really hard to build credibility on paper through my experiences. So when I do manage to get an invitation to the table, I have had to face this challenge of therefore owning my voice in that situation. And I've had to try various different approaches to how to deal with this when people might have incoming biases against me by virtue of my appearance. And this is still a work in progress, and I'm still figuring out how to go about that. But honestly, I can try to come across as more firmly spoken, and in that case, I receive feedback that I'm too overbearing. Then I can try and be more reserved and, very considered in expressing my opinion. And then I'm told that, I wasn't strong enough, and people will just walk all over me. And what I've pretty much figured out from all of this is that the best approach is just to be myself in those situations, because someone's always got something to say. And, I've just learned that there's a reason that I'm in that room. It's been harder for me to get there in the first place. And so if I'm just myself, that experience is going to shine through when I do step up to that platform. And of course, there's always a need to balance whatever the situation is. But in general, it's just too exhausting to go about my career, not bringing a version of myself that isn't authentic to the table every day. Like, that's just not sustainable, and it's also not playing to my strengths, my unique strengths that only I can offer to a team. So yeah, I guess what I've learned from having to break those barriers of appearance is just having the courage to express my own voice and express my own self and have trust in my abilities. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's that claim your space, but I am who I am. I know what I know, and that covers in every shape, size, and package. And yes, but it can be really off-putting, can't it, when you get all that feedback and you go, well, what can I do with that?
Yeah.
I'll just be me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it takes a lot of confidence, though, doesn't it? It takes a lot of confidence and self-belief, Emma.
Absolutely.
But you seem to be there, and you seem to have that. So great. What do you think your greatest leadership power or gift is right now at your stage of career? What's your greatest leadership power or gift?
So, of course, we all know leadership comes in lots of different shapes and formats. And I think, you've got that sort of leadership that's up the front. It can be very pioneering, explorers, adventurous. Then there's also sort of more this peer-to-peer mentorship and leadership that we've talked a little bit about today. And reflecting on where I kind of demonstrate leadership, I think one of my greatest strengths is my ability to bring others on the journey. In particular, I find that when I'm impassioned by a cause, whatever that cause is for me, is this sort of source of energy, and not just an energy for me to be able to bring my best self and my talents to the situation, but also, in fact, to be able to share, kind of overflow and share that energy with others to unite them around that same cause as well. And again, just linking back to that idea of being purpose-driven in our leadership, when you're pursuing change and impact out of a place of enthusiasm and authentic passion, that's when you kind of shine most as a leader and can really bring others on the journey as well. So yeah, that purpose-driven leadership, it's so topical these days. And I think there's a real reason why. So I'd say that's kind of my strength.
I'm realising the time is moving on. So I think I'll ask you next, what are you most proud of so far?
I think, we've kind of covered it, but that ride for DV, for domestic violence, not just getting back up after the accident, but I cannot explain to you how much training I had to do to get there. So just that experience of the training for that ride, I hadn't touched a road bike ever 3 months out from deciding to do this. And, within 3 months, I was cycling 1,300 kilometers, just over 100 kilometers a day. And if you think about the training schedule for that, I would cycle 30 to 40 kilometers every sort of work day after work. And then I would do long rides on the weekend. And the first ride I did was just 20 kilometers. That's all I could do. And I figured out that with the space of time that I had, I needed to add 20 kilometers a week to that weekend long ride to reach 120 before I left. And mind you, those long rides included a couple of 1,000 meters of elevation as well, because there's lots of mountain ranges in Tasmania. And one really pivotal moment for me in that training schedule was the 120k ride that I eventually built up to. And I was about 100 k's in. I'd done, I think, 2 mountain ranges by that point, and we hit this section of the cycle that we call 10 hills, and all it is 10 hills, one after the other after the other. They're not too crazy, but they are these sort of rolling hills that are like quite strenuous by the end. And I think I got to about 5 or 6 hills of 10. I just got to the top of one of them, and I just never felt such physical fatigue before, but also mental fatigue, because at that point the only thing getting me through was one more hill, one more foot in front of the other, and I'll get there. And I think I just couldn't I couldn't tell myself one more pedal anymore. And I got to the top of whatever number that hill was, and I just had the biggest cry. And I just don't think I've ever felt more broken than in that moment on that training ride. And I was convinced I wasn't going to be able to finish it, and I was going to need to call in a car to come get me home. And I kind of realized though, and it flicked a switch for me, that if I couldn't do that training ride and finish it off, then I couldn't do Tasmania. And I think elevating the context to that higher goal, it switched something for me. And I did get back up on the bike, and I finished those 10 hills and got myself home to the best shower and the best meal ever. But yeah, like the discipline and resilience that I showed myself, genuinely from a place of humility. I didn't think I was capable of digging that deep and pushing myself to achieve something that was so hard at the time. And so I think, just kind of knowing what I'm capable of now and what that threshold is, which has been just brought up to this new higher level, that that's all thanks to that experience, and something that I'm really proud of, going beyond what I ever thought I could achieve.
What a fabulous story. I feel privileged to have heard the story, let alone not have lived it. So what do you do when you have some spare time? What's your favourite go-to when there's a bit of spare time around?
Yeah, well, of course it's not sitting on the couch. I love to boulder in my spare time. This is a hobby that I've recently found in the last 12 to 18 months. And I actually originally took it up because of my love for hiking, but I have a terrible fear of rock scrabbling. And I found that was sort of inhibiting some of the hikes that I wanted to do. So to get over that fear, I decided to give bouldering a crack, and just ended up finding this whole new hobby out of that process of trying to get over my rock scrabbling fear. And I think if I link that back to leadership development, my encouragement to the listeners would be to go try some fun new activities that might be a bit out of your comfort zone. And you can make it really fun. You can do it with a friend in a very low pressure environment. My 2 housemates have just decided together that they're going to go along and start DJ classes together, you know, as another example. And, you know, I think doing something like that is just such a great way to build self-confidence and empower yourself and show yourself what you are capable of in a fun way, and maybe find a new hobby at the same time.
And it's doing something new and different that you haven't done before, isn't it? Or
exactly.
Sometimes it's just for fun. Sometimes it, as you say, to overcome one potential fear or anxiety to allow you to do another. And that's fabulous. So I haven't talked to anyone who does bouldering, but and I understand what it is. So that's fabulous. So what's next for you, Emma? What do you think's next?
Yeah. So I think, you know, we've talked a little bit about the importance of surrounding ourselves with all different kinds of people so that we can leverage diversity of perspectives as leaders to be more effective in our leadership. So what's next for me is, and we've talked about this as well a little bit, is I'm deep in the midst of graduate school applications to hopefully get myself overseas, continue to level up my technical skills in the fields of data science and analytics in particular, but also hopefully surrounding myself with a whole diverse group of people while I'm over there who will no doubt teach me a lot based on their different experiences and contexts in life, and also form a really important network for me as a leader in the later stages of my career.
Sounds absolutely amazing. Have you got one thought to leave us with today before we finish this amazing conversation?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, if it hasn't rung clear already, that leadership does come in, you know, many different shapes, sizes, appearances, and that everyone really is a leader in the corner of the world that they've carved out for themselves. So just don't be afraid to step in and own that space that you've made and created for yourself, because you're the best person to own it.
Thank you so much, Emma Beal, for your time in preparing for this and being part of our amazing group of remarkable women with a powerful story. I hope you go well and go safely in the next parts of your career, and we're really pleased that you're a friend of Zonta International. So thank you again. And to everyone watching this today, please join me as 2023 progresses, as you'll hear Emma's story and many, many other stories, and please share with your friends and colleagues. So for now, we'll see you next time.